Welcome to the deep dive. Glad you could join us today. We're about to plunge into, well, a truly wild and imaginative world.
That's right. We're looking at H.G. Wells' classic, The First Men in the Moon.
Yes, specifically using excerpts you sent over from the Project Gutenberg text. And our mission, really, is to unpack the big ideas, the surprising details from this amazing adventure story. It's over a century old, but still feels fresh.
Absolutely. And we'll meet our main guys, Mr. Bedford, who's, shall we say, a shrewd businessman.
Maybe a bit opportunistic.
Maybe just a bit. And then there's Mr. Cavour, the classic, eccentric, brilliant scientist type.
Their unlikely team-up kicks off this incredible journey. The discoveries they make are just fantastic, all pulled straight from the text we have here.
So where do we start? Not with a rocket launch, actually.
No, it starts with Mr. Bedford, who's in a bit of a tight spot financially. Like, seriously tight. He's hiding out from creditors in Lympne, Kent.
Right. In this little bungalow, desperately trying to write a play to make some quick money. He needs that little reserve put by for a rainy day, as Wells puts it.
A very relatable start, honestly. You feel for the guy, even if he is a bit dodgy.
Yeah, and while he's sweating over this play, which sounds like agony for him, he keeps noticing his neighbor, Mr. Cavour.
Oh, the eccentric scientist.
Exactly. Cavour has this really peculiar walk, rhythmic, gesticulating, and he hums this specific sound.
Zoo.
Zuzu.
Okay. Sounds noticeable.
Definitely. So one day, Bedford, maybe just fed up with writing, interrupts Cavour's pacing routine.
And Cavour is not thrilled.
Not at all. He's actually quite put out. Says Bedford blocked his path, disrupting his scientific thinking, which needs, and this is a quote, constant thought, constant mental ease. His walking is his thinking process, apparently.
Okay, so Bedford, ever the opportunist.
Sees an angle. He suggests Cavour use him as a sounding board, a wall against which you may throw your thoughts and catch them again.
Partly to get him off his back, but also, is there maybe an invention here? Money to be made.
You bet. Bedford smells potential, and surprisingly, Cavour agrees. He actually finds it useful to explain his ideas out loud.
And funnily enough, the text says this actually cured his humming habit. No more Zuzu.
Yeah, it's a great little detail. But what's really key here is how this accidental meeting, born from, money troubles and a blocked path, sets everything else in motion.
It really highlights their differences from the get-go. Bedford's thinking business, escape.
While Cavour's purely after the science, the discovery. That tension is there right from the start.
So, about that science. Those first lectures Cavour gave Bedford sounded intense.
Oh, absolutely. Dense physics stuff. Ether, tubes of force, gravitational potential. Bedford admits he didn't get most of it.
But he played along. Smart move.
Yeah, pretended to follow just to keep Cavour talking. And Cavour's place sounds just as odd as him. An amazing little place, sort of out of the way.
Like a mad scientist's lab.
Pretty much. Business from cellar to attic. Furnaces, dynamos, even a gasometer outside. But his lifestyle was simple vegetarian, only drank water, all focus on the work.
Okay, so the big idea, the core concept.
Right. Cavour's observation is that everything we know seems transparent to gravity. Nothing blocks it, unlike light or heat.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So he asks, well, why shouldn't there be something that is opaque to gravity? Why assume it's impossible?
A genuinely revolutionary question.
And Wells grounds it a bit. Cavour shows Bedford these incredibly complex calculations, supposedly referencing real scientists of the time, Kelvin, Lodge, Carl Pearson.
Which Bedford definitely didn't understand.
Not a clue. Left him in a hopeless muddle. But the math convinced Cavour that this substance was possible under very specific conditions.
And that substance is cavorite.
Cavorite. He thinks he can make it from a complicated alloy, plus something new, maybe helium, that arrived in these sealed stone jars, described as very gaseous and thin.
Okay, gaseous and thin, but what does it do?
This is the kicker. Put a sheet of cavorite under anything, however enormous the weight.
Yeah.
You could lift it with a straw. It completely negates gravity's pull beneath it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that changes everything.
Exactly. And Bedford's reaction, instantaneous.
His business brain must have just exploded.
Completely. He's not thinking science, he's thinking applications. Guns, ironclads, shipping, building.
A vast, stupendous cavorite company. World domination, basically.
Forget the play. This is the real ticket. It's sort of perfect contrast. Cavour's abstract wonder versus Bedford's immediate, practical, and let's be honest, greedy imagination.
That dynamic is going to be crucial. So they have cavorite, or Cavour thinks he does. What next? Build something.
Build something, which leads us to the vessel. It's not really a smooth sphere, more polyhedral, like faceted. Think a giant soccer ball made of flat panels, and each panel has a cavorite blind, like a window shutter.
Okay, cavorite shutters. And inside.
An inner glass sphere, airtight, and an outer steel shell for protection. The blinds are operated by springs and electricity. Open, close. Simple.
So how does it move?
It's clever. Close all the blinds. The sphere is totally cavorite coated, opaque to gravity, so it just floats or travels in a straight line, unaffected.
Right, like it's cut off.
Exactly. But then you open one blind, say facing the moon, suddenly that side isn't shielded.
Ah, so the moon's gravity pulls on that side.
Precisely. It attracts them towards the mass in that direction. They can tack about in space, using planets or the moon to steer.
Ingenious.
Yeah.
And the goal, where are they taking this thing?
Well, Cavour has one destination in mind. Go to the moon.
Just like that. Why?
For Cavour, simple. New knowledge. That's his whole motivation.
And Bedford.
Bedford's reaction is priceless. Only, I don't quite see what we shall do it for. Classic Bedford. What's the profit margin on moon rocks?
Exactly. But they prepare anyway. What do they pack for a moon trip in, 1900?
Wells includes these great sort of mundane details, a little heap of stuff. Compressed foods, concentrated drinks, oxygen cylinders.
Air recycling.
Yep, a system using sodium peroxide to remove carbon dioxide and release oxygen. Water condensers, too. It all sounds, as the text says, convincingly matter-of-fact.
Despite the completely bonkers idea of flying to the moon in a metal ball coated in anti-gravity paint.
Right. The final construction sounds intense, too. Bolting the steel shell, plastering on the cavorite paste, then building a whole furnace around the sphere.
A furnace? Why?
For the final heating stage with that mysterious helium-like substance, that seems to be the key step to activating the cavorite.
Okay, almost ready. How's Bedford feeling now? Still thinking about his cavorite company?
Not so much. He's hit by enormous funk. Total fear. The reality of it, the unearthliness of the whole thing, suddenly feels like a nightmare.
The sphere seems flimsy all of a sudden. Cavour seems unreal.
Exactly. He can't sleep. He's wrestling with the sheer, terrifying risk. It's a big shift from his earlier greedy confidence.
Understandable. That fear is palpable. Okay, part 4. Lift off. Or float off.
Pretty much. Screw in the glass cover, Cavour closes the final blind. Instant darkness, immediate silence.
And they're just going.
Flying away from Earth at a tangent aimed roughly at the moon, they crack open a blind occasionally to check, using Earth or the moon for guidance.
What's life like inside this thing?
Weird. Time gets blurry. Neither night nor day, obviously. They sleep a lot, eating is minimal.
The food's bad.
Strange, anyway. Laxness and texture, Bedford says. Little appetite. Apparently they weren't producing much carbonic acid, so maybe the air system worked too well. Or they were just inactive.
What do they do, just float?
Mostly quiescence. Bedford brought Titbits magazine to read.
Of course he did.
And Cavour brought Shakespeare. Apparently he'd never read him before, his education being purely scientific.
Shakespeare in space. So, the moon. What does it look like as they get closer?
Wells gives us this amazing description. First, a stupendous scimitar in the sky, familiar craters and ranges. But then, details you wouldn't see from Earth.
Like what?
A haze thickening as the sun hits the surface, white patches shrinking, maybe frost, and strange colors appearing, brown and olive tints as the light changes.
And they talk about life. Could there be anything up there?
They do. Cavour speculates. He says powerful telescopes could spot big structures, maybe, but life would need extreme adaptations.
For the temperature swings.
Exactly. 14 Earth days of blazing sun, then 14 days of absolute zero cold, maybe underground life, ant-like things, or something completely alien with no earthly parallel. Wells is really setting the stage.
And the landing. Smooth sailing.
Anything but. Intense exertion for Cavour, trying to control their descent by flicking the blinds open and closed. Bedford's just anxiously floating.
Zero-G must have been tricky.
Utter chaos inside.
Yeah.
Floating loose, kicking helplessly. No, up or down. They hit the surface hard.
Yeah.
Bruises guaranteed.
So they arrived. Battered, but on the moon. Part 5. First steps. Or first sights.
First, just darkness. They landed just beyond the sunrise line. The inside of the glass sphere is all fogged up with condensation. They have to wait.
Bedford tries to clean it.
Yeah, but just smears it worse with condensation and bits of blanket fluff. Then he slips on the damp floor and bangs his shin on an oxygen cylinder. Not exactly Neil Armstrong.
Huh. Definitely not. So they wait in the dark.
Have a meal while they wait.
Yeah.
That weird food again, like a goffer or a damp meringue. But slowly, The glass starts to clear as things warm up.
And then sunrise.
And what a view! The wildest and most desolate of scenes. They're inside a huge crater, a vast circular plain.
What can they see?
To the west, cliffs lit by the sun showing rock and what looks like banks of snow. Above, a pitch-black sky just crammed with stars like a gloriously spangled velvet curtain. To the east, the cliffs are still in shadow and the plain nearby is gray, cold, undulating, alien, stark.
Did you say snow? Snow on the moon?
Ah, well, that's the next surprise. Those white hummocks and billows. Not snow, it's frozen air.
Frozen air. Seriously.
Seriously, Cavor figures it out. As the sun hits it, it's visibly rising, evaporating, turning back into gas. The atmosphere is literally forming around them as the day begins.
Mind blown. So an atmosphere does appear.
A thin one, yes. They see a little touch of blue tint the black sky. The stars seem bigger, some fainter nebula vanish. The haze turns into a surging fog.
In this thawing process,
Oh,
it's gentle.
not really. The melting ice and air splashes onto the sphere, making it whirl around violently. It's a dynamic, almost violent dawn.
Wow. Okay, frozen air melting. What else?
Plants. This is maybe the most startling thing. Little seed-like things burst open in the heat. Yellowish-green lines appear.
And they grow.
Unbelievably fast. Rootlets, buds, spiky brownish leaves, visibly lengthening like mercury creep up the tube, faster than time-lapse photography. A whole alien ecosystem springing to life in hours.
Incredible. So there is air then. Enough to breathe.
Cavor does a test, burns a bit of paper just outside the sphere, a little blue tongue of flame, proof of oxygen. It's breathable, at least for now, near the surface during the day.
This moon is way more alive than anyone thought. Frozen air, instant plants.
Completely overturns expectations. It's a place of rapid, extreme cycles.
Which naturally makes them want to go outside. Part 6. Exploring the low-G world.
And the low gravity hits them immediately. Bedford forgets himself, tries to step a yard.
And leaps 6 yards instead.
Exactly. He describes falling like a feather, taking ages 5 or 6 seconds to drop just 10 yards. It's disorienting, horrible, and delightful. He even pulls an accidental somersault.
Sounds fun, but probably dangerous. What about breathing?
The air is thin, dry. They have to pant. Shouting is difficult. Bedford thinks the air tastes sweet. Maybe high oxygen content from the rapid plant growth. They feel adventurous, though.
Buoyed by the low gravity.
Yeah, literally. But then they make a classic mistake.
Oh, no.
They wander off from the sphere to explore more easily. And how do they mark its location?
Please don't say they just left it.
Worse, they tied a handkerchief to a nearby moon bush.
Oh, Bedford. Oh, Cavor. That's not going to end well, is it?
Probably not. And almost immediately, things get weird. They hear sounds.
Sounds? What kind?
First, a rhythmic tolling, like a giant clock. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Then silence. Then a massive clang and rattle, like huge metal gates opening.
Uh-oh. Not natural sounds.
Definitely not. Later hammering machinery noises and the bellowing of great beasts. Mooncalves, as they later learn.
Mooncalves. What are they?
They don't see them yet, just hear them. Calf-like noises, angry bellows. They're hiding, crawling through this dense, weird moon jungle, trying to get back to the sphere.
Which they can't find because they left a handkerchief on a bush.
Pretty much. Bedford's getting desperately hungry, mouth too dry to even whisper.
Then they find food.
Yeah, these big, flabby, purple fungi. And apparently they taste infernally good, like cold souffle or that damp meringue again.
Edible moon fungus.
Okay. Bedford wonders if it's actually mooncalf flesh somehow processed into fungus. Eating it gives them this weird, irrational exhilaration, makes them forget the danger for a bit.
Dangerous combination.
Yeah.
Exhilaration and forgetting danger. Do they see who's making the noises?
They do. Their first selenite, a mooncalf minder.
What does it look like?
Alien. Really alien. Short, under 5 feet, leathery clothes, like a complicated insect but upright. Tentacles for hands, a clanging metal arm, a big spiky helmet probably for prodding the mooncalves, and goggles. Bird-like, Bedford says.
Insectoid. Bird-like.
Oh,
Okay. And the encounter goes well.
about as well as you'd expect. Cavor, maybe offended scientifically, insects on my vertebrated stomach, leaps at them.
In low gravity.
Which means
He does a massive somersault and disappears into the crowd of them. Bedford tries to follow, leaps, falls, and feels metallic clasps.
captured.
Captured. They wake up in darkness, chained hand, foot, and waist to the ground. Definitely prisoners of the Selenites.
Oh dear. Now what?
Well, trapped in the dark, they start hearing things. Sounds like a busy street or factory somewhere below. Tappings, rubbings, then the click of a lock. A door opens. A thin, bright line of light appears.
They're underground. That's Cavor's deduction. He notices the air feels denser as they're pulled deeper. He puts it together. The moon must be hollow, enormously cavernous inside, with its own atmosphere, maybe even a sea.
And that explains the low density astronomers measured.
Exactly. And the lack of air and water on the surface, it's all inside. Cavor feels it's such an obvious thing in hindsight. His brain is still working overtime.
Bedford's probably not feeling so analytical.
Not at all. He's full of despair, regret, calls the whole trip extraordinary folly, wishes he'd stuck to playwriting. He figures they look like dangerous animals to the Selenites and expects the worst.
Hunted, killed.
Yeah, but Cavor sees a glimmer of hope. They weren't killed outright. They were restrained, fettered. That implies intelligence, maybe even a chance for intercourse, for communication.
Two completely different takes on being chained up by moon insects. That's our guys.
Perfectly sums them up. Cavor, the curious scientist. Bedford, the terrified pragmatist.
So, Part 7 takes us deeper into the Selenite world. What are their captors like up close?
They get unchained a bit, allowed limited movement. Bedford describes their touch tentacles are soft and cold, but their skin is hard, shiny, like beetle wings. Spines, ridges, those ever-present goggles. They even use their mouths sometimes, like a third hand.
Creepy. And they're being led somewhere.
Yes, by taller Selenites armed with goads. Getting the humans to their feet is apparently quite an effort. Elephantine heavings.
Where are they going?
Towards the source of the sounds and that strange blue light they saw filtering up, they reach the great cavern.
It's impressive.
Immense, filled with colossal machinery, constantly moving parts, stuff whirling and flying, pouring streams of incandescent blue liquid. The scale dwarfs the Selenites themselves. It's a massive industrial operation.
But things turn hostile again.
Yeah, one of the guards pricks Cavor with a goad. Bedford loses it, reacts angrily. The Selenites are totally shocked by this resistance.
They don't expect pushback.
Seems not. Cavor pleads for submission, but then Bedford gets goaded himself, and it actually snaps a link in his chain.
An opportunity.
He takes it, hits the Selenite, and they make a break for it back into the tunnels.
Running from the moon insects. Sounds like a movie scene.
Totally. Scrabbling through tunnels lit by that blue rivulet, shadows everywhere, crystals, side passages, sounds of pursuit behind them.
And Cavor, still analyzing.
Unbelievably, yes. Even while fleeing, he's speculating about the Selenites. He thinks they could be reasonable, they could teach and learn. If humans just showed reasonable minds. He's fascinated by the unanticipated things they must know.
While Bedford is just focused on the pain and fear.
Absolutely. Chains, goads, anger, pain. He winced like a beaten horse. Total focus on survival.
Do they escape the tunnels?
They reach an open space, but it's not daylight. Just another cavern lit by phosphorescent fungi. Big letdown. Bedford gets all nostalgic for Earth's sky.
So they're trapped again.
Pretty much. Cornered, unarmed, fear lost, no food, and they've just proved they're violent. Bedford thinks they're doomed. He dismisses Cavor's idea about Selenite philosophers being interested in them.
And the pursuit is catching up.
Sounds like it. Footsteps, alien chatter, that rhythmic hacking sound, chid, 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 chains, even a rumbling truck. Shadows are moving in the fungal glow.
But Bedford has a thought about the mooncalves.
Yeah, a smart deduction. He remembers hearing the mooncalves being lowered earlier, and they didn't seem to fly or hop much. So they were near the surface then. Maybe Bedford and Cavor are near the surface now, having fled back upwards.
Yeah.
Leads them to a confrontation, anyway. With a different kind of Selenite. Shorter, stockier, long arms, carrying hatchets. The butchers.
Butchers, oh boy.
Yeah.
Fight scene.
Definitely. Bedford rips a spear-like bar from a grating and starts jabbing at the Selenites below them. The butchers attack with hatchets, but surprisingly, they actually retreat when Bedford charges them. Maybe they aren't used to direct physical aggression.
Maybe, but it's not over.
Nope. Cavor shouts a warning. A different Selenite, lean and angular, appears with some kind of complex device, like a weapon.
A gun.
Something like that. It fires with a chuzz sound, like a crossbow, maybe. Aims at Cavor, but hits Bedford. Knocks him down. Alien tech.
Wounded, but they keep going.
One last desperate push for the surface. Struggling in the thin air, panting, the tunnel exit getting bigger. They see that dead, spiky bush they passed on the way out.
They made it. Back outside.
Yes, but Cavor, ever the scientist, immediately checks the time. Sun setting. The long, freezing lunar night arrives in less than 4 Earth days. The clock is seriously ticking now.
Out of the frying pan, into the freezer.
Yeah.
Okay, part 8. They're on the surface, injured, night's coming. What now?
Find the sphere, it's their only chance. But time is short, and the Selenites are behind them. They make a tough call. split up to cover more ground.
Risky.
Very. Bedford leaps west, Cavour leaps north into the low G twilight.
Bedford search. It doesn't sound easy.
Agonizing. He's stumbling, twists his ankle, feels hysterical, trembling, can barely breathe, just desperate.
But he finds it. Please tell me he finds it.
He does. The relief when he sees that familiar dark interior is immense. He checks the supplies. But then he pauses.
Pauses. Why?
He hesitates to signal Cavour. Maybe fear. Self-preservation. The text leaves it a bit ambiguous, but it's a crucial, dark moment for Bedford.
Oh, man. Leaving Cavour potentially stranded.
It seems that way. And alone again in the vast crater, the fear floods back. It feels empty, silent, except for rising wind. Dread of the Selenites. He tries to shout for Cavour, but his voice barely carries. The sun is sinking fast, no sign of Cavour.
Then he hears them, the Selenites.
Yes, shouts. They're pursuing him. It becomes this desperate, frantic race back to the sphere. Anguish, the text says. He's numb, bruised, cut, but strangely not bleeding much. Maybe the low pressure again.
And he makes it inside.
Just manages to scramble in, slams the shutters closed, plunges into absolute silence and darkness. He feels like he's been violently killed by the sudden sensory deprivation, then just drifting, astonishment at the blank infinite.
He escaped, but alone. Now he has to get back to Earth.
Yeah, and it sounds like pure luck more than skill. He uses the Caveret blinds, getting a push from the moon's gravity, then trying to adjust course to intersect Earth's orbit, realizing he could easily just miss it entirely.
Just floating in the dark. That must have been weird.
He describes this strange detachment, physically comfortable but feeling like he's watching himself, watching Bedford from outside, questioning his own identity in the void.
Whoa. Existential crisis in space.
Pretty much. But it passes as Earth's gravity gets stronger, pulling him back to reality, reminding him who he is and where he's going.
And re-entry. Fiery.
Dramatic. Falling through the atmosphere day to night, Earth looking flat, then concave, becoming the world of man again. The sphere gets super hot, then splashed down in the ocean, sinks, then bobs up. He made it.
Where does he end up?
Washes ashore at Littlestone in Kent, wakes up on a sandbank, sees houses, trees, first thought.
Bacon and eggs.
Exactly. Earthly food. He looks like a ferocious savage, apparently, when some young guys in flannels find him.
Do they help him?
They do, though they're clearly skeptical about this wild man and his weird metal ball. They help him drag his treasures ashore, attracting a crowd.
And at the local inn?
He demolishes breakfast. The young guys try to get his story, don't believe a word of it, but they're fascinated. Keep watching the sphere. Bedford, though, he knows the trip was a disaster, a rout. He's just focused on saving himself now. He's not telling them the whole truth. Certainly not about leaving Cavour.
He cut his losses. Grim. But is that the end for Cavour?
For a while, Bedford thinks so. He gives up on going back on the Caverite secret, just wants to disappear. But then, part 9, a twist.
Yeah.
Letters arrive from a Mr. Wendigee, claiming to have received messages from the moon.
What, radio signals?
Something like that.
Sure.
Some kind of wireless transmission Cavour managed to rig up. Bedford's skeptical, then excited. He goes to Wendigee's observatory.
And it's true. Cavour's alive.
Alive, and apparently free, though he got lamed in the escape or fighting, living among the Selenites as an honored guest. But Cavour thinks Bedford is dead, since the sphere returned without him.
Wow. So Cavour's sending back info. What does he say?
Incredible stuff. Confirms his hollow moon theory, a sponge of rock for miles inward, full of tunnels, caverns, even an internal sea. Says the crater rims are excavated mounds, not volcanoes. Explains the low density. Mentions internal winds, dangerous creatures, the Rafa with tentacles, the darting sea killer. He also sounds ill and misses color. Everything down there is lit by that blue glow.
And Selenite Society. Did he figure them out?
In amazing detail. Confirms the insect-like anatomy, the size variations. Says they're not different species, but innumerable forms of one species, like a vast anthill, hyper-specialized.
Specialized how?
Extreme physical adaptations. An intellectual class with huge heads, no bony skull limits brain growth. Administrators like Fi'u. Experts like a football-headed thinker Cavour uses for abstract ideas, erudite beings like Seapuff, who literally are the living libraries, storing knowledge.
Living libraries. Wild. What about workers?
The operative class, machine hands. Limbs or organs exquisitely adapted for one task, some tiny, some just turning spits constantly. Then muscular police, trained for obedience. And the mothers or queens noble-looking, but with tiny heads.
A completely alien caste-based society. How did Cavour communicate?
with difficulty, especially abstract ideas. Needed analogies, used CPUF for information recall, but eventually the Selenites recognized his deliberate rationality, saw he wasn't just a brute animal. They eased his confinement, let him build his transmitter.
And he met the leader, the Grand Lunar.
Yes, described the Grand Lunar as the quintessential of the moon, a marvelous gigantic ganglion, a huge brain basically yards across, appearing like a small, self-luminous cloud, needs servants to support it. Reaching him involved a whole procession, a litter, giant stairs.
What was the interview like?
The Grand Lunar makes this wheezy noise, Fi'u translates. Welcomes Kavor, intensely curious about Earth, amazed by surface life, clouds, rain, sunlight, asks to see Kavor's iris, ask about building on Earth, the inside of our planet.
Kavor tries to explain Earth's society.
Calls our state's rawest sketches. Then there's apparently an illegible bit in the message. Maybe Kavor censored himself, or the signal was bad.
But the Grand Lunar asks about language and war.
Yes, baffled by different languages. They want to communicate and yet not to communicate. But war deeply interests him. His reaction is pure disbelief. You mean to say, you run about over the surface of your world, killing one another for beasts to eat?
That's a chilling question. Puts humanity in a stark perspective.
Doesn't it? Using the alien view to judge human behavior. And this seems to be where things go wrong for Kavor. Which leads us to part 10, the final messages.
Something happens after that interview.
The messages become less frequent than stop. The penultimate one ends abruptly. Kavor was signaling intensely, seemingly unaware of danger closing in.
And his big mistake was talking about war.
It seems so, revealing humanity's violence, aggression, and crucially admitting that only he held the secret of Cavorite, the key for humans to return. He basically presented humanity as a potential invading force.
And the Selenites, being hyper-rational,
their cold, inhuman reason likely saw only one logical response to such a threat: protect their hidden world.
So the final messages, are they Kavor realizing this?
It looks that way. After days of silence, just fragments come through. Desperate fragments.
What do they say?
Fragment 1. I was mad to let the Grand Lunar know. A moment of terrible realization. He understood too late what he'd done.
Now the second.
Fragment 2. Cavorite made as follows. Take a last frantic attempt to get the secret out.
But it cuts off.
Cuts off, right there, mid-sentence. The implication is clear. He was interrupted, silenced, captured or killed. His scientific detachment, his want of vulgar common sense, as Bedford calls it, failed to see the danger in revealing humanity's true violent nature. A tragic end for such a brilliant mind. He found his new knowledge, but it cost him everything because the knowledge he shared about us was too terrifying for the Selenites to ignore. He saw scientific exchange. They saw an existential threat.
So that wraps up our deep dive into these fascinating excerpts from The First Men on the Moon. What an incredible journey Wells takes us on.
It really is. We've touched on so much: the unlikely partnership, the invention of Cavorite, and its, well, slightly hand-wavy physics.
The sheer practical audacity of building a spaceship in 1900.
Exactly. And the moon itself, not dead rock, but a place of frozen air, explosive plant life. Just utterly bizarre and imaginative.
And then the Selenites. That incredibly complex alien society, the different caste, the Grand Lunar, leading to that tragic ending, driven by Kavor, revealing too much about us.
We really got to dig into the specifics Wells laid out in the text you provided, exploring his ideas and the story arc in detail.
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Here's something to chew on. What does this story really suggest about first contact? About the danger of showing our, well, less admirable human traits, our violence, our divisions to an intelligence that might be vastly different, maybe hyper-rational and fearful?
Or maybe look at the contrast between Kavor and Bedford. Kavor's pure, almost naive drive for knowledge versus Bedford's more grounded, self-serving pragmatism. Which approach is actually better suited for exploring the unknown, for surviving it? Is pure curiosity enough, or do you need that vulgar common sense?
Kavor gets the knowledge but pays the ultimate price. Bedford survives, but arguably learns less and maybe loses a part of his humanity in leaving Kavor behind. Wells definitely leaves us with some heavy questions long after Bedford splashes down back on Earth.